Welcome back to Old Guy REI. Mikey and I are back this week to do a recap of our last Wednesday accountability Zoom call. And again, we had another great meeting. We had one or two new people join us. Uh, One person from Chicago, and a lot of good stuff came up. I think in the end, we realized that this Zoom call kind of went to the dogs, and we'll explain what that means. Um, Mikey, you went through the whole thing with me as you do every week. And there was a few things that came up where the Chicago investor had asked about how most of us find rental comps for our units. And I have a few thoughts. When you look at properties in your market, I think you're under contract for a new one. How do you find rental comps?
It is we had talked about going through the hot pads and then just having that hearted and then being able to be notified when it gets taken off of hot pads. So I use that, then I save that. I use Notion. It's a kind of note-taking software, and I just add all the rentals that have been taken off market, and I just kind of create my rent box off of that, and then I can cross-check it with my property management.
How long do you usually look at rents? Is it a couple of weeks or months?
It's actually around that. And Hotpads really helps me because I on that listing when I make a note of it, I listed how many days it's been on the market for.
Okay, great. Um, some of the other people in the group talked about the HUD Fair Market Rents website, and a lot of you can look in there under counties or cities. I noticed a couple of ours when I looked them up this year. They last year they were listed by the county, but this year they're listed by zip code. So that was a change. I think we spoke last week about the fact that one of our zip codes went down for 2025, but all the rest went up. So that was a surprise to me. They also use things like Rentometer or the Bigger Pockets rent calculators, things like that. And there are a few other apps. I think last time I was doing it, I even used Zillow and looked up rentals in the areas where our units are, and that was pretty helpful. I think for us, one of the bigger resources or most important resources is the actual property managers. If you're going to use a property manager, they know the areas, they know the markets, so they can get comps as well.
I know Dion, he had mentioned he likes to wait for December to come around before getting a rentometer because I know that one you have to pay for. And I've also used Rentcast. That's free, but when I kind of compare it to the markets I'm in, it the numbers don't line up, so it's not really that accurate.
Yeah, I think you have to you gather as much information as possible, come up with kind of an average, check in with the property managers. Some of us also have called the housing authorities if we're considering using a Section 8 tenant. That can be really helpful because they'll give you the honest number of what they're willing to pay for a two-bedroom or a three-bedroom or whatever it might be. Some of the, talking about the meeting going to the dogs, we started talking about insurance for pets and which kinds of pets might be acceptable. We talked about ESA animals and things like that. Have you had to, I know you had looked up some of the information from your insurance provider as to some breeds that your insurance company wouldn't insure.
Yeah, so we're looking at Akitas and pit bulls, and it was funny because we are all laughing about there was actually in the line there was a wolf hybrid mix that's not allowed, so we are all laughing about that. So that was pretty funny talking about it.
Yeah, there was a few people that actually had some experience with it. I know we did. I had talked to you about a young woman who wanted to bring a puppy with her, and it was a pit bull puppy. And when we checked with our insurance company, they said they wouldn't insure us with that kind of a dog. And some people made suggestions about, you know, making sure that it was a real ESA animal. And I guess there's a way to find out if it's true through a veterinarian or whoever, a doctor, if it's, some kind of um, I guess, a comfort animal, for lack of a better term. But if they can't provide that kind of proof, then it's not really an ESA animal, things like that. And then there were some instances where even if it was, you could still charge a pet fee per month. Um, but it is going on a case by case basis. And so you'll just have to check your local markets and see what your insurance company will do and that kind of thing. A few people had talked about, again, with insurance, what companies they use for umbrella policies and things like that. And USAA came up a few times as a really good place to check for insurances. Somebody mentioned a company called RLI for an umbrella policy. And it's something that's been coming up in the top topics of discussion recently that we've already talked about in the past was saving money on insurance. Um, and Matt talked about it in his last live, where people are doing what they call a cash value policy versus a full replacement policy. And a cash value policy, what some people do is they'll insure the property for the purchase price plus 25%. So if you buy something, say for 100,000, they'll insure it for 125, and their rate is a lot lower than if they insure it for full replacement coverage. But when you do that, you're planning on, if you have a catastrophe, you get your insurance money, you clear the lot instead of rebuilding, and then reinvest your money somewhere else. I think you still have full replacement policies.
I do.
Yeah, some people just feel better that way. And I guess too, it could depend on the market or the property, but I was surprised to hear Matt was actually considering doing something similar across his portfolio because he mentioned his insurance increased by a huge percentage this year.
Yeah, and I liked in Lumberjack Landlord's stream where he said, also check the rating of your insurance company because why insure with a company that has a poor rating who, if you do make a claim, you might not even have that kind of followed up and followed through. So that was a great point. And then, just talking about the deductibles, I know at least when I was shopping, farmers, at least for my properties, was only 2,500. Whereas when I went with travelers, they went up to 5,000, which helped my yearly quotes.
Yeah, that I guess that's maybe area dependent, but I know in St. Louis we raised our deductibles to 5,000 and that made a nice difference for us. We just had new insurance imposed on us here in California and um it's like a fire insurance. So I was really surprised because they broke it down for us. Our regular insurance policy only cost us 300 a year, but you have to have fire coverage, and the fire coverage was 2,200 for the year. So total is 2,500, which basically doubled what we were paying before. We were paying 12 or 1,300, but the fire insurance will let us go up to a $20,000 deductible, and that will drop the premium down to 1,500 from 2,200. So I think we're going to do that. We're hoping to only be in California for another year or two. So I don't mind paying it for the couple years that we'll be here.
I'm waiting
Um,
for that old guy REI house hacking episode soon to come.
yeah, that's gonna be that's gonna be a fun one, I'm sure. Um, getting back to the dogs for a minute, um, one of the people that joins us pretty often actually runs a doggy daycare, and he was also saying that in their business there is a list of animals that they won't care for because of, I guess, not necessarily the liability, but just the, I guess, aggressive nature of some pets, how well they do with other pets or how well they do with other people. Um, so he really supported what the people were talking about when they were talking about getting insurance on certain breeds. There was, I think Santiago was talking about considering on one of his units to maybe do short-term or midterm rentals. And one of the other people on the call was actually a short-term rental co-host, and they offered support for anyone with questions about the process. And they could answer a lot of questions. But some of the things they were talking about was lower cost ways to furnish their units because that's a big part of the business, and it is more like a business, right, than long-term rentals. But they were talking about things like checking out Craigslist or even Goodwill stores and things like that to find nice products to fill your units with. Do you think you would ever take on short-term or mid-term rentals yourself?
I am in Hawaii, so never say never, but I just don't see that in my future. I kind of like the long term buy and hold real estate.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same camp as you are. But also having to do with midterm and short-term rentals, they were also talking about places to find clients. It used to be nurses were good midterm rental tenants, but they were saying that the nurse thing was kind of fading out and talking about some other things that are getting a little bit more recognition these days, like business executives and even construction workers. Somebody had even recommended, driving around the areas to see if the hotels or motels had a lot of pickup trucks or um, work trucks from different businesses and things like that as a way to find those guys. And there was even someone who mentioned renting to insurance companies for displaced families. Sometimes people go through, yeah, either a hardship and don't have a place to live, and the insurance company will pay for them for a place to live. But also, somebody mentioned like somebody might be doing a remodel on their home and the remodel gets extended for a few months for some weird reason and they need a place to stay. So they were talking about calling insurance companies and even real estate brokerages to find those other types of tenants that are going through maybe somebody's house sold too soon and they can't move into their new place for a while and they need a place to stay. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, even in their ads, they were just surprised at the communication that brought forward, where they're like, "Oh, I didn't realize that, my my property actually has it opens up to different types of clientele."
Yeah, I think that helped a lot of people out. Um, some people were talking about when they're buying a new place that they would rather the seller get the current tenant out versus inheriting a tenant. And a lot of them were saying that most of their issues come from inherited tenants. They just want to start with a clean slate and pick their own tenant. But a few of our guys, Dion, for one, likes to buy places that have tenants in place. And um, he was saying that he'll try the tenant out at least until their lease ends, see how they pay, see how needy they are, that kind of thing before he'll renew the lease with them. And if he doesn't want to renew it, then he'll just end their lease and get a new tenant after they're out. Some of the people were talking about software they use to manage their properties. Do you have something that you use?
I like Baselane, at least from an accounting perspective. Marcus Shiro, financial firefighter, had told me about it, so I just set it up. So I hooked up all my bank accounts, my credit cards, and then whenever I see a real estate charge, I make sure I link it to to base lane, and it's really straightforward and simple.
Yeah, we haven't started using anything like that, but some people were mentioning that they were having, well, they called them banking issues with Hemlane, but I think it was more, some of it was the tenants didn't understand how to use it. And I think Dion has mentioned that he has one tenant that doesn't really have much technology. She writes him paper checks for her rent. But I think that was something that you would have to, I guess, look at tenant by tenant. Somebody mentioned, if their tenants are 40 or younger, they have no problem with technology, and us old people, as me, sometimes have issues. They don't trust technology. They can't understand how their money makes it from one place to another safely without any issues. Some people were talking about the natural progression when you are a new investor, and they were talking about, starting out with basically turnkey properties. And then once you learn that or start to learn that and get a couple under your belt, then you might progress to property that might need a little bit of lipstick, as they say, and then moving on to real burrs or things like that, and other strategies like creative financing or seller financing. I know you started out, I think your units were pretty turnkey, weren't they?
Mhm. First one was definitely turnkey, and second one was more lipstick, I'd say.
And the second one, like we were just talking, did you inherit tenants on both of yours?
The
Just the
second
second?
one, I did. The first one was vacant.
Okay. Yeah. And you were saying the second one, being an inherited tenant, has been great so far?
Yeah, it's probably been stable from the beginning, so knock on wood, but yeah, it's been going great so far.
Good. That looks like about all we covered in that meeting. That was quite a bit. Um, One question you had for a few of the people was whether or not they buy gifts for their team. And I think by team, you mean like your agent and property manager and things like that.
Lender, we so we have, you've introduced me to Brian Bilstein from Neighborhood Loans, and he's been a rock star. So, that's a team that I guess we share now, but we were talking about, what are the gifts that we're thinking about because they've been so helpful for us as investors, and you want to keep that working relationship strong. And we've kind of debated about what do we look at, what are type of things we want to give just to show them our gratitude.
Yeah, I think, we're in a few different markets. We have a few different property managers and stuff. And out of I think we have 5 different property managers. A couple of them we work really closely with because they're smaller, but they've helped us through a lot of stuff. So we're definitely considering some gifts for them this year. Our agent has been super with us. We've closed on 3 properties with her help. Even our insurance broker, he's been super responsive. He All we have to do is connect him in the email chain with our agent while we're going through the process, and they get it all done. So that's been really helpful. We have a couple of contractors that we've worked with that we got through our agent and property manager. So we usually just tip them when they finish a project for us. I think that's we talked about that too. One of the best things you can do for a contractor that you like is make sure they get paid right away and give them a tip so they'll want to help you, want to work with you on the next project.
Yeah, I really liked where it's, if you have a relationship and, someone gives you an off-market deal, if they would give their unborn child to that person. So it depends on what type of value they're bringing, but yeah, you want to try to keep that working relationship as strong as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to move forward. Well, hopefully our next meeting will be just as great and productive as this one was. But thanks again for helping me out with these highlights. I really love having you on with me and your opinions. because you think of things a lot differently than we do or than I do. And it just brings another perspective that I think is really helpful to people. So we'll look forward to doing this again next week.
Yeah, thanks. I always appreciate being on.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see you
All
soon.
right. See ya.